According to NPR, the average home price value in the U.S. went up 18% in 2021. Zillow is predicting a tight buyer's market for 2022, but they think values are only going to go up 11% this year. The Fed plans to increase interest rates by the end of the year, and all of this information is projection. We don't really know what is going to happen. And as some of my favorite viewers have pointed out, I'm not an economist, so what do I really know about what will or will not happen in the real estate market? And that is a totally valid point. And if you've been watching my channel for a while, you've probably heard me say that I don't know what's going to happen, and neither do any of these YouTubers who like to toss about their readings from their crystal balls. But in an attempt to get just a little more legitimate, I decided to ask Mike Regan, the CEO of brokerage Hunter Rowe and grad degree holder in financial economics, for his opinion on the upcoming year's real estate market. In our discussion, which I'm going to share the most juicy clips with you in just a minute, we talked about the big differences between the 2020 market and the 2021 market and how that might influence the 2022 market. We talked about the one thing you really need to know when buying an investment property in the Triangle, and that information really applies to anyone buying a house this year. We also talked about why Triangle builders are not building affordable homes, and finally, we talked about the absolute best month to make an offer on a home if you want to get the best deal. And this advice is based on real data from the last 10 years of real estate sales, and even though the seasonal flow got a little wonky in 2020, it really did go back to traditional seasonal ebbs and flows. And in those ebbs and flows, we can see which months have the lowest ratio of sales price to list price. So yes, even though the market is still crazy, it is actually possible to get a deal on a house if you follow this advice.
So one thing I've been noticing in all the articles I've been reading is they're all going to say it's not going to be as busy, but nobody has a really good reason why they think that. The one argument I've actually heard for it is that interest rates are going to go up a little bit, and that's going to make speculators not be in the market as much. So there'll be a little bit of freeing up because of that. Tell me what you think about that.
Well, earlier you were mentioning economists and people whoever they are that's making these predictions. And I was starting to laugh because I think you should listen to any of them. I don't think they have any idea. And I think they've proven it over and over and over again that they have no idea what's going to happen. Overall, here's how I look at it. They're making more people all the time, but they're not making any more land. The supply of housing and places to live is fixed. The demand for it's going to be ever increasing. And so over time, the value of real estate is going to go up. Now, what's going to happen in some period of time, some time frame, I think is kind of random. People periodically freak out and they decide, oh man, the market's going to go bad, and that can gotta be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think at other times people all kind of think, oh, the market's going to do well, and maybe it goes up a little faster than normal. But in general, you can't get away from supply and demand. And if you're making decisions about where you're going to put your money, I think you got to put your money in places where the supply and demand situation is just going to happen, because it can't not happen, right? Anybody who feels like they really know what the market's going to do, they shouldn't be making forecasts. They should be making investments. I will tell you, Ellen, what I think is the best investment in real estate, though. Residential investments and renting them out to people is by far, I think, the best investment you can make. To make good money in residential rentals, you have to be thinking more about the appreciation potential than you do about the monthly cash flow.
Yes, I tell people that all the time. Yeah, it's not going to cash flow here, really. You're just going to have somebody else paying the mortgage while it increases in value.
I ask people all the time, if you have a house where you make $500 a month in cash flow, which is a lot of cash flow for any rental, would you rather have that, or would you rather have a house that you made no cash flow and it appreciated by $10,000? $10,000 is more than $6,000, however you cut it. And that's what we've seen in our area. And we've helped lots of people to buy investment properties and make tons of money, but it's all been appreciation, not cash flow. I would say invest at the higher end. I mean, invest in properties that are over 500,000.
Yes.
And the reason for that, number one, you're going to have better tenants that are going to probably take better care of your property. Number two, you're much more likely to get multi-year contracts, right? And number three, why worry about 5 properties when you can worry about 1?
But when you have 5, isn't that kind of like not putting all your eggs in one basket? You know, I mean, isn't it easier to kind of keep 5 5 mostly rented, then you might have one that sits open for a few months or something like, you know what I mean? Isn't there less risk?
Here's my thought about that is that you're going to have 5 times as many calls to fix the toilet.
True.
You're going to have five times more likely to have tenants that aren't going to take good care of your property because they're not paying enough for it. And you're going to have, on average, across those 5 lower end properties, you're going to have some time when people aren't paying their rent, right? Which is also more likely in a lower end property. So I don't think that having it open or free is much of an issue, especially since right now, go on MLS and try to find a rental property. You can't find them because they're all booked. And people don't realize how much demand there is for higher end rental properties. There's people out there that do not want to buy a home, but they want to live in a nice home.
I wanted to talk about the Triangle MLS and the difference between what happened in 2020 and what happened in 2021. All right, so this is some data that I pulled for the last 2 years. And there's just a couple of interesting dynamics that I'm seeing on here. So the first thing we're looking at 2020 on the top. We're looking at the price per square foot and the percent over list price. So basically, you can see that in 2020, in every price point, on average, properties are selling for a little bit less. So people are negotiating, in other words. Now, I thought of 2020 as being a very competitive year, and it was a competitive year, but still overall, and these numbers are for Wake County, for the entire county. Overall, we're looking at less competition because people are actually negotiating the price down on average. But then if you look at 2021, you can see how much the square footage increased in each of these different price points. And the bottom here is the change. So in the 300,000 and under price point, the price per square foot went up $27 from 2020 to 2021. Mm-hmm. I think this is one of the significant things here. It only went up $7 from the 3 to 450s. And I have a feeling, my gut instinct, why that was so much smaller was because I think in that price point, I think what you're getting is older fixer-uppers rather than smaller homes. Why do you think that's different there?
Yeah, I think this is really interesting data. It looks like all the other price points went up pretty significantly in terms of dollar per square foot.
Yeah, except for that one.
Yeah, I'm not sure, honestly.
It's interesting, isn't it?
It is. I think whenever you look at this dollar per square foot, you have to take into consideration that it's not necessarily that same home sales went up that much.
It could be new construction versus existing and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Right.
There's
because if a greater proportion of the homes that are sold are new construction, which I think has been the case, they have higher per dollar per square foot prices. But
of course.
So the up to 300K, I think that could be same home sales just because there's so few of those houses available and there's a lot of demand for them.
And they're not really building in that price point.
Yeah, and I would say I don't know how much they're really building in the 3 to 450 right now.
The other interesting thing was that shift from 2020 to 2021 in the 1 to 2 million. I think and I think that does have to do. I bet if you pulled that 2020, you would see not that much new construction. Because 9% over list price in the 1 to 2 million, that's probably new construction and people choosing features, like more expensive features. And I think there's been a real desire for luxury housing in Raleigh.
I think I've seen more of that this year than I've ever seen anywhere. Well, last year, 2021, than I've ever seen before.
And when you've got companies like Apple coming in, I think what is their median salary? It's either the 130s or the 160s or something like that. So, but that sort of thing, I think is going to cause this push for more luxury housing in our area. I think that's going to keep growing. I really do.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think these kinds of points for our specific local area, I think are very valid. And I think that we can look at our microeconomic situation here and make some pretty good guesses about the future. I think that it's a fantastic place to own real estate. I think the Apple thing is probably the biggest factor there of, again, more human beings coming in, right? And a fairly fixed amount of land and real estate available. And I think that's going to be causing a lot of upward pressure on prices here in our local area. with regard to forecasts for the entire economy, it's so funny that, you mentioned Zillow, right? Zillow saying what they feel like the market's going to do. But at the same time, Zillow stock went down 25% earlier this year.
Right, because of their bad judgments.
That's right. Because they claiming to be the experts in how to value houses, they pulled out of this iBuyer business because they made so many bad decisions about the value of houses.
At the beginning of this, like a year ago, people would call me and I'd be like, okay, well, if you want to save some money, you can look in like Fuquay or Wake Forest, some of the more outlying towns. And now I'm like, well, you're still going to pay $500,000 if you're living in Fuquay.
Where there's already a concentration of homes, I just don't think there's been as much turnover in those areas. So to me, I think that the relative prices of homes that are closer into the city center versus houses that are further away, I think relatively they stayed about the same.
I almost wonder if it's gone up more percentage wise in the outlying areas because you get a newer house. I know like in Cary, that median price point around $400,000 now, you're getting a fixer upper in Cary, and so like moving out a little ways, you can get a newer home or a new home for the same price.
Yeah, I think part of that too is that the price of land has gone up so much because there's just hardly any land available to build on anymore. And so since there's so many builders competing for the land, it's pushed the price of land up. And typically the way it works with new construction is that the final build price of the house is going to be about 5 times the cost of the land. So if the price of land goes up, it doesn't make economic sense for them to build a home any less than a certain price point, or else the builder's not going to make a profit. So I think that's a big part of it too. And now as there's less and less land available, we've got almost the same number of builders, but competing for much less land. And so those pieces of land just go for really high prices. So
Which
I think that could be part of it too.
We're seeing a lot more townhomes being built. When I first got into real estate in 2015, and it was about 10%, the available homes were townhomes or attached housing. We have virtually no condos, but we're starting to see more of those. But now it's getting close to, I think, 30%. We really are shifting into a more dense kind of population.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely among city governments, I think there's also a trend for more dense populations. They feel like it's more sustainable and there's less travel. So I think the governments are approving a lot more of those types, and they prefer to approve those. And of course, the builders like it too, because if you can sell, $300,000 townhomes in the same amount of space that you put one house, that's like selling $1.5 million house, right?
Right.
Obviously, this is more expensive per square foot to build most townhomes, just because you got to duplicate the walls and the utilities and so forth. So, but I think it's very profitable for builders to be able to build those.
Last thing on my list, I wanted to pull up this really cool Redfin data, because I think this data helps people really know when the best month of the year is to buy a house. You can see, so this is the sale price to list price ratio. So you can see that there's always this low point. So the lowest sales price to list price ratio every single month is in January. January.
Sure. So the first month or two of the year every time.
This craziness was 2020, but then this was January of 2021. And then these high months are always June, or almost always June. I guess 2012 was a little different, but that was August. Interesting. Okay, so June, this was May, June. So the highest sales price to list price is almost always in June. And the lowest is almost always in January. And that's held true pretty well. Well, I guess with COVID shutdowns and things like that, it kind of messed up like when those times were. So the best months to buy a house are going to be December and January. So the lowest sales price to list price is in January, which means that those are houses that went under contract in December, which means if people are planning to buy a home in 2022, they should buy it right now. If they wait until December, which is the first best month to buy a house, interest rates are going to be higher. And I think that's inevitable. What do you think? You think that's a definite?
Yeah, I mean, I think interest rates have been artificially low for 10 years now. Interest rates that are normal for homes are around 6%. And so at some point, the interest rates have got to return to that level.
Yeah.
And everybody's going to be surprised when it happens because it's been so long that they've been low. But yeah, I think it's got to go up at some point.
If you like this video, you might really like this one about how Zillow flubbed their projections of the real estate market.